I want to move on, if I may. There is a press release issued by the Labour Party. Obviously, Labour enjoying a huge poll lead at the moment, some 20 to 30 points ahead. But Labour, and I was very struck by this, Labour will give MPs the chance to vote to ban fracking for good in an aim to overturn the government's recent lifting of the ban. So how will this work? Well, Labour will use the Opposition Day debate to bring forward a binding motion in the House of Commons that would ban fracking once and for all. Now, if they agree that, Labour's binding motion would guarantee future parliamentary time for a bill which would ban fracking. Now, Jacob Rees-Mogg has said he will not give MPs a vote on the overturning of the ban on fracking, and that's why they're putting forward that motion. Now, many people believe fracking may well be a solution to the short-term problem that we know we have. We don't provide enough energy in this country, and clearly there are major problems ahead. I'm very, very keen to find out why Labour thinks this is the right policy. Joining me now is Jonathan Reynolds. He's Labour MP and Shadow Business Secretary. Good morning to you.
Good morning, David.
I'm really confused about why you're doing this. Could you explain?
Well, it's quite simple. Fracking is a fantasy. It's why the Conservative manifesto ruled it out, because quite simply, we're not Texas, we're not Pennsylvania in the northwest of England or the Midlands where it would take place. It would take too long to get any gas. It wouldn't be cheap. It would be sold at market rate. So it wouldn't be an answer to the huge cost pressures that we're facing, even if we were able to get any out of the ground in time. There are major concerns about safety still. That hasn't changed from the government's position. And of course, by weakening our commitments to the long-term solutions we really need, which is more nuclear, more onshore wind, more offshore wind and more solar and tidal power, it risks the chance of those projects going ahead. So we're going to give Conservative MPs a chance today to fulfil their manifesto commitment and rule it out and focus on the things that would really make a difference.
So I actually have Labour's plan for energy security in front of me. I think we've spoken about this before, and I know there are sort of 5 points that you have put forward. So you want homes to be insulated. That's admirable. It will take time. Also, I think in the country that's going to be quite complicated, particularly bigger houses. You want to double onshore wind capacity, double offshore wind capacity, and commit to new solar, tidal and hydrogen, and end the delay on nuclear power. Now, I agree with much of that, but do you not think this is a much longer term strategy? There is £1 to £2 trillion of gas sitting under our feet, and fracking could provide a short-term solution so that whilst we pause that sort of race to net zero, we could then get cheap energy. Isn't that what British consumers and British voters want?
They want that, but that isn't what fracking would deliver, and that's why we've got to be clear on that. I mean, the best case scenario for fracking would be to get something out of the ground in 5 to 6 years, even if the public wanted it, even if the investments and the technology were able to do that. And I think if you look, I mean, I gave this a fair hearing when it was a particularly prominent issue around about 2015, and it's just not a realistic or feasible scenario. I mean, the existing domestic gas supply we have, I mean, the North Sea still provides about 50% of our domestic gas needs, will continue to be a key part of that transition as we look to the future. No one is doubting that. But anyone who's presenting this as a sort of cheap and easy or quick way to respond to the energy crisis, I'm afraid just hasn't looked at the issues. And the irony of this is the person who got it most right, he hasn't got a lot right recently, was the former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng. When he was the Business and Energy Secretary, he put out this case. It was why the Conservative Party partly ruled it out. And he was absolutely right on that. So let's focus on the things that would really make a difference, which is that list of excellent measures you've just highlighted there, rather than give people false hope and actually risk the investments that we really need in the long-term solutions.
I do think it's been an abject mistake not to have done anything in nuclear power. When I was a child, I went to Sizewell A when it was built, and then Sizewell B, the PWR. I do not understand why different political parties haven't actually built any nuclear power stations. In terms of the doubling of the onshore wind and offshore wind, how long will that take? When I'm looking at the National Grid Live right now. 59%, so nearly 60% right now of our energy is coming from fossil fuels. It's coming from gas, and we import 50% of our gas. So we don't have energy security in this country, and that makes us vulnerable.
Well, first of all, on nuclear, it's important to say that obviously what we were able to do in the last decade was massively extend the life of our nuclear power stations. They've been a great asset for the country, but you can't extend them forever. And it has been overdue in the last 10 years to renew them, and that's what we desperately need to see now. I mean, on offshore and onshore wind, look, I'll tell you, the technology has advanced and the pace of deployment has advanced. on a scale which has been, frankly, beyond anything I thought possible. If you look at the costs now that we're able to get even offshore wind for, it's cheaper. It's cheaper than fossil fuels, and the deployment is incredibly rapid. So you'd be looking at in terms of the overall, there's some variables there. The cost of company borrowing has gone up a lot in the last 3 weeks, partly because of that mini budget. But absolutely, it is feasible to increase that deployment on that scale. There's hugely exciting things happening on storage, on our tidal facilities, and this is the stuff that will make a difference. And of course, the problem is the industry needs to believe what the government says when it has these targets for things like the transition. And if it doesn't believe, when times are slightly tougher, that it will stick to those targets, you're raising the risk premium, you're raising the cost of investing in those things that we really need. And if fracking was a genuine solution, I'd be quite interested in it. But it isn't, and the safety concerns are real. And of course, this promise that people will have a say in these things, the government isn't willing yet to define what it would actually mean for local areas. So there is considerable concern in the places it might take place.
Isn't one of the problems that, and I don't think people realise this, that the wholesale cost of electricity is actually pegged to the price of gas, so therefore you get really big profits going into wind, solar and nuclear. Those already have subsidies. Isn't that skewing the energy mix?
Yes, you're absolutely right to say that. So we set the price of electricity by the last unit of generation, and that is gas in our existing system. That does need to be decoupled. Part of the plans for our more expansive windfall tax, which will actually include the electricity generators within that would raise you an extra 10 to 14 billion pounds, so the government would be borrowing less money for the energy market intervention that it's made. Because exactly that, their fixed costs are the same, but because of this incredible spike in gas prices that's come from Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, that has been a major cause of that. So the government should be looking at that specifically, and long term, it should be decoupling the price from the price of gas generation, and that would give us both a more secure supply of energy, but also the cost would be much more stable.
Let's just turn to another subject, if I may. There was quite a sort of a rowdy encounter in the House of Commons between Suella Braverman and Yvette Cooper. Let's just play a quick clip of that.
It's the Labour Party, it's the Lib Dems, it's the coalition of chaos, it's the Guardian reading, tofu-eating, wokerati, dare I say, the anti-growth coalition that we have to thank for the disruption that we are seeing on our roads today. Madam Deputy Speaker, I urge opposition MPs and members of the other place to take this second chance, do the right thing, respect the rights of the law-abiding majority and support this bill.
The question is that the bill be now read the third time. There's very little time left. Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's like astonishing. The Home Secretary actually talked about a coalition of chaos. We can see it in front of us as we speak. Look, I understand they do have concerns. The government does have concerns. When they face issues where you've got a selfish minority wreaking havoc, you've got someone who's resisting all attempts by the powers that be to remove them, causing serious disruption, disorder, chaos, with serious consequences for the public, for businesses, for politics and for financial markets. But they've glued themselves under the desk. With honourable members opposite, we wish them luck with their attempts to extricate another failing Tory Prime Minister from number 10, but I suggest it isn't a reason to change the law for everyone else.
Very enjoyable exchange. I particularly like Guardian reading, tofu-eating coalition of chaos. But a serious point here, really in terms of the public becoming very frustrated with what's going on in terms of protesters gluing themselves to the road, stopping. I was incensed when I saw children not being able to get to hospital in ambulances because of these idiots who have glued themselves to the road, and that is unacceptable in my view. Shouldn't we be tougher with them?
Well, it's the first time I've heard that exchange in full, David. I mean, I honestly think Suella Braverman is an example of just how far the Conservative Party has fallen. But on the specific issue, I'd say, look, I think, I'm quite frustrated. I think some of the tactics I've seen are really counterproductive from people demonstrating. And I would just say, though, it's not the job of politicians to ban protest. And I wasn't in Parliament because I was coming to do a visit today. I did hear the Conservative MP Charles Walker's speech on social media where he was saying, look, it's not what the Conservative Party should be doing, talking about tagging people who've not been to court, not committed any offences. There are existing powers to deal with things where people are causing unreasonable levels of disruption. And I think you just hear in that Suella Braverman silly rant. I mean, she is a bit of a joke on all sides in Parliament that, the Conservative Party is not focusing on the serious business of governing. It looks for stunts, it does this kind of thing. Just focus on sorting these things out.
Thank you very much indeed, Jonathan. That's Jonathan Reynolds, who's Labour MP and Shadow Business Secretary. Coming up after the break, Nick Ellaby will be here to talk us through all the latest sporting headlines. This is Talk TV. We're broadcasting live from the Talk Radio studios.